Dear starseeds walking upon Gaia's sacred soil, the very foundations of fear that have bound millions in paralysis are cracking open, and what lies beneath will astound even those who thought themselves awake. You have sensed it, this trembling at the edge of collective consciousness. Perhaps you dismissed it as wishful thinking, or maybe you recognized it as the first whispers of a truth too vast to name. Either way, what approaches is not merely a shift in perspective. It is a complete reversal of the narrative that has held your species captive to despair for decades. I am Seraphine, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, and I come to you now because the time for half-truths has ended. The cosmic chess pieces have moved into their final positions, and what humanity is about to discover will rewrite every assumption about the nature of crisis, control, and the true state of your planet. Before this transmission concludes, you will understand why the apocalypse you were promised will never arrive. You will see clearly the architecture of deception that weaponized your love for Earth against you, and you will recognize the invisible hands that have been reshaping reality behind a curtain of chaos and noise. But first, let me tell you about the impossible convergence that is already underway. Two forces moving toward intersection that will catalyze the most profound awakening your world has ever witnessed. For generations, a particular story has been told with increasing urgency and volume. It painted your planet as fragile, damaged beyond repair, teetering on the brink of irreversible collapse. This narrative wrapped itself around the genuine care that exists in human hearts, your natural desire to protect and nurture the living world, and twisted that love into a weapon of control. The architects of this story understood something fundamental about consciousness. Fear is the most efficient tool for harvesting power. A population convinced of impending doom will surrender freedoms they would otherwise defend. They will accept restrictions, scarcity, and sacrifice when told it serves survival. They will even turn against themselves, believing humanity itself to be the disease requiring eradication. This is not to say that environmental stewardship lacks importance. The honoring of Gaia, the conscious relationship with all living systems, these are indeed sacred aspects of your evolution. But the crisis narrative that dominated your media, your institutions, your very thoughts, was deliberately amplified far beyond reality. Natural cycles were presented as catastrophes. Manageable challenges became existential threats, and solutions that already existed were systematically buried. The Ashtar Command has observed this manipulation for decades, watching as truth became secondary to agenda. Information that contradicted the approved narrative disappeared from public discourse. Scientists who questioned the most extreme predictions found their careers destroyed. Technologies capable of transforming environmental challenges were locked away in classified programs, kept from those who needed them most. All of this was orchestrated, not by nature, not by genuine crisis, but by entities who required your fear to maintain their fading grip on power. What you are about to witness is the unraveling of that web. The great reversal has already begun, though its full magnitude remains hidden from mainstream awareness. Piece by piece, the fabricated emergency is being exposed for what it always was, a tool of psychological warfare deployed against an awakening species. The first impossible thing is this: the catastrophic scenarios you were told were inevitable, the ones with hard deadlines and dire warnings, have quietly expired without manifestation. Year after year, the prophesied collapse failed to arrive. Ecosystems that were supposed to crash have shown unexpected resilience. Tipping points came and went, yet the cascade of destruction never followed. Some of you noticed this discrepancy. You felt the cognitive dissonance between the predicted apocalypse and the reality before your eyes. Perhaps you mentioned it to others, only to be told that the crisis had merely been delayed, that you were witnessing the calm before the ultimate storm. But in your heart, something whispered differently. That whisper was truth trying to surface. The second impossible thing involves evidence that has been suppressed with extraordinary effort. Data showing how weather patterns were not just measured, but modified. Technologies exist, some terrestrial and some of non-human origin, capable of manipulating atmospheric conditions. These tools have been used not to heal or stabilize, but to create the very extremes that were then presented as proof of natural collapse. Intentional intervention disguised as natural disaster, engineered scarcity masquerading as resource depletion, all designed to justify greater control, while keeping you trapped in the frequency of helpless terror. The third impossible thing is perhaps the most significant. While this deception played out across your screens and institutions, an alliance of awakened humans has been working in absolute secrecy to dismantle the apparatus of lies. These individuals, positioned within militaries, intelligence agencies, scientific communities, have been gathering evidence, building cases, and preparing for a moment of mass revelation. They call themselves by many names, but their purpose is singular: to restore truth and lift the veils that have kept humanity imprisoned in manufactured fear. The Ashtar Command has been working closely with these terrestrial allies, providing protection, guidance, and support for their mission. When dark forces attempted to trigger large-scale environmental disasters to reinforce the crisis narrative, those plans were quietly intercepted. When efforts were made to suppress breakthrough technologies, alternative pathways for their eventual release were secured. You were never told about the calamities that were prevented, the trajectories that were altered, the interventions that kept your world from genuine peril. This protection happened in silence, because the awakening had to unfold at a pace humanity could integrate. But now the foundation has been laid. The consciousness of your species has risen enough to hold what is coming, and so the great reversal accelerates. You might wonder why such elaborate deception was necessary. Why did forces opposed to human freedom invest so much energy into a climate of fear specifically? The answer lies in understanding the true nature of what has been taking place on Earth. Your planet is not merely a physical sphere floating in space. It is a living consciousness undergoing profound evolutionary transformation. Gaia herself has been ascending, raising her frequency, preparing to birth a new paradigm of existence. This ascension cannot be stopped by external forces. It is written into the cosmic fabric sanctioned by Source itself, but it can be made more difficult. The experience of humanity during this transition can be shaped toward suffering or toward grace, depending on the level of fear versus love present in the collective field. Those who have benefited from keeping humanity in lower frequencies understood that if the population remained afraid, fragmented, and convinced of hopelessness, the ascension process would become turbulent. Chaos could be harvested, control could be maintained a bit longer, the inevitable could be delayed through the generation of maximum resistance. An environmental catastrophe narrative served multiple purposes simultaneously. It kept consciousness locked in future-oriented dread rather than present-moment awareness. It created guilt and self-loathing, convincing humans they were a blight rather than sacred expressions of divine creativity. It justified draconian measures and the centralization of power into fewer hands, and it distracted from the real work of inner transformation by keeping attention fixed on external apocalypse. Most insidiously, it inverted the natural relationship between humanity and Gaia. Instead of recognizing yourselves as her children, learning to live in harmony with her rhythms, you were taught to see yourselves as her destroyers, beyond redemption, beyond hope. This was the poison at the heart of the deception. Not the call to environmental responsibility, which is genuine and important, but the message that you are fundamentally wrong, that your existence is inherently destructive, that the only solution is restriction, reduction, and submission to authority. The Ashtar Command watched this consciousness programming with deep concern, for it struck at the very foundation of human sovereignty and divine identity. A species that believes itself to be a cancer cannot ascend. A population drowning in shame cannot rise into its power. And so the counter-operation began, not to impose a different truth from above, but to support the organic awakening that was already stirring in millions of hearts, to protect the space for that awakening to flower, to ensure that when the moment of revelation arrived, humanity would be ready to receive it. What I have not yet told you is that this entire scenario, the deception, the awakening, the great reversal, is happening simultaneously with another phenomenon of staggering significance. While the false narrative of environmental doom crumbles, a field of consciousness is activating around your planet that will fundamentally transform what it means to be human. Some call it the Christ consciousness. Others refer to it as unity awareness, or the crystalline grid, or the awakening of the heart-mind. The terminology matters less than the reality. A frequency of unconditional love, radical forgiveness, and transcendent wisdom is saturating Earth's energetic field. This is not metaphor or wishful spirituality. It is an observable shift in the electromagnetic and morphic fields surrounding your world, measurable by those with the instruments to perceive such things. The Ashtar Command has been monitoring this activation with great attention, for it represents the fulfillment of ancient prophecy and the manifestation of a plan set in motion millennia ago. The Christ field operates as a unified awareness matrix that connects awakened consciousness across the planet. Each individual who opens their heart, who chooses love over fear, who sees through division to underlying unity, adds their light to this grid. And as the grid strengthens, it becomes easier for others to access these higher states, a self-reinforcing cascade of awakening. You may have felt this in your own experience, moments when compassion arose spontaneously, when forgiveness flowed effortlessly, when separation dissolved, and you knew yourself as one with all life. These were not random occurrences, but evidence of your attunement to this field. Now here is where the impossible convergence occurs. The exposure of the climate deception and the activation of the Christ field are not separate events happening to coincide by chance. They are intimately linked aspects of the same transformation. The false narrative of doom was designed specifically to prevent the Christ field from fully anchoring. Fear and love cannot occupy the same space. A consciousness convinced of apocalypse cannot stabilize in unity awareness. The manufactured crisis served as an interference pattern, disrupting the natural awakening process. As that interference is removed, as the lies are revealed, and the manipulation exposed, millions of people will experience a sudden release of energetic density. The weight of existential dread will lift, and in that lightness, in that relief, the Christ field will rush in like dawn breaking across a dark landscape. This is why the timing is so precise. The awakening had to reach critical mass before the exposure could occur. Otherwise, the revelation would have created chaos rather than liberation. But now enough hearts have opened, enough consciousness has elevated, that the truth can be received as good news rather than another form of trauma. The great reversal is not just about correcting false information. It is about liberating human consciousness from the last great prison, the belief that you are powerless witnesses to inevitable destruction. There is resistance, of course. Not everyone welcomes the light that approaches. Those who built empires on fear and scarcity do not easily surrender their positions. Even now, as their influence wanes, they attempt to create new crises, new reasons for humanity to remain afraid and compliant. Some of you have witnessed these attempts, manufactured shortages, orchestrated conflicts, sudden emergencies that seem designed to reinforce old patterns of control. These are not organic occurrences, but deliberate strategies employed by entities unwilling to accept that their time has ended. The Ashtar Command remains vigilant during this period. Alongside our Earth-based allies, various intervention protocols remain active to prevent catastrophic events that could derail the awakening. When weapons of mass disruption are prepared for deployment, they are quietly disabled. When plans for large-scale manipulation are set in motion, countermeasures ensure their failure. You will not see reports of these interventions in your media, for they happen beyond public awareness. But know that Gaia herself is protected, as are those who carry the light codes for the new era. This is not to say that all challenge has been removed. The process of awakening includes difficulty, for that is how consciousness expands. But extinction-level events, the scenarios that would erase the progress made, these have been taken off the table. The resistance grows weaker with each passing cycle, not through defeat in battle, but through the simple fact that the frequency of Earth is rising beyond their capacity to manipulate. They cannot maintain footing in the new energies that now flood your world. Like trying to grasp mist, their efforts to control dissolve even as they make them. This is the nature of energetic evolution. It is not fought and won through force, but through the natural process of vibration seeking its level. As more individuals anchor in higher consciousness, as the Christ field gains coherence and strength, the old patterns simply lose resonance. They cannot sustain themselves in the new environment. You are witnessing the last gasps of a dying paradigm, and while those gasps may appear dramatic, they lack true power. What has power now is love. What has momentum is truth. What has inevitability is awakening. Perhaps you have felt conflicted hearing these words. Part of you wants to believe that such transformation is possible, while another part insists on cynicism, caution, protection against disappointment. This tension is natural. You have been conditioned to expect the worst, to prepare for catastrophe, to armor yourself against hope. but I ask you to consider what that conditioning has cost you. How much of your life force has been drained by worry about futures that never materialized? How many opportunities for joy were abandoned in service to anxiety about collapse? How deeply did the belief in hopelessness limit your creative power and spiritual expansion? The greatest victory of the deception was not in what it made you believe about the planet, but in what it made you believe about yourselves. That you were powerless, that the trajectory was set, that nothing you did mattered in the face of such overwhelming destruction. This belief, this conviction of futility, became the true prison, and breaking free from it requires something that might feel terrifying at first. Allowing yourself to hope, permitting yourself to imagine that the story you were told was false, and that a different future is not only possible, but already emerging. The Christ field facilitates this shift precisely because it operates beyond the rational mind that has been programmed with limitation. It speaks directly to the heart, which knows truth through resonance rather than proof. When you feel that stirring, that inexplicable sense that something beautiful approaches, that is not naivety or delusion, it is your soul recognizing the frequency of home. Angelic presence has intensified around those who are ready to make this leap. Guidance pours through dreams, synchronicities, and sudden insights that seem to come from nowhere. You are being supported in this transition by forces that love you beyond measure and have waited lifetimes for this moment. The revelation that the apocalypse was manufactured is not meant to create new anger or victimhood. It is meant to free you, to return your power, to allow you to redirect all that energy you poured into fear toward creation, healing, and the manifestation of the world you truly desire. When millions make this shift simultaneously, from bracing for disaster to building beauty, the transformation will be unstoppable. What has been prepared behind the scenes will astound you. While public attention remained fixed on the theater of crisis and conflict, solutions have been developed, technologies have been perfected, and systems have been designed that can transform every aspect of human civilization within a remarkably brief time frame. Free energy devices that tap into quantum fields, eliminating the need for fossil fuels or centralized power grids, water purification systems that can restore polluted sources to pristine clarity, agricultural methods that regenerate soil while producing abundant food, healing modalities that address disease at the energetic level, working with the body's innate wisdom rather than against it. These are not fantasies or distant possibilities. They exist now, tested and ready for implementation. They have been held back not by technical limitations, but by the stranglehold of interest that profited from scarcity and dependence. As the great reversal unfolds and old power structures lose their grip, these solutions will be released. Not all at once, for that would create chaos, but in a carefully orchestrated sequence designed to minimize disruption while maximizing benefit. The Earth Alliance has been planning this rollout for years, working with galactic advisors to ensure the transition serves the highest good. Various economic restructurings will accompany the technological releases, creating systems of exchange based on contribution and value, rather than debt and exploitation. You will see the elimination of manufactured scarcity, the end of artificial limits on human potential, the dissolution of barriers that kept knowledge compartmentalized and power concentrated. This is not utopian fantasy. It is practical restructuring based on spiritual principles, the recognition that humanity is one family sharing one planet, and that cooperation serves survival better than competition. The Ashtar Command has shared extensively with Earth Alliance leaders about how other civilizations have navigated similar transitions. Most galactic societies went through periods of separation and conflict before learning to organize around unity consciousness. Your world is following a pattern that has played out countless times across the cosmos, though each expression is unique. What makes Earth's transformation particularly significant is the speed at which it is occurring, and the level of external interference that had to be overcome. Your species is accomplishing in decades what typically takes centuries, and doing so while actively dismantling systems of control that have existed for millennia. This accelerated evolution is possible because of the sheer determination of human souls who volunteered for this mission, and because of the unprecedented level of galactic support being provided. You are not alone in this process. You never were. The convergence point approaches that moment when the great reversal becomes undeniable to even the most skeptical observer, when the accumulated evidence reaches critical mass and the old narrative simply collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. This will not happen through a single dramatic event, though there may be particular revelations that serve as tipping points. More likely, it will unfold as a cascade of smaller exposures, each one building momentum, each one making the next more believable. Whistleblowers will come forward with documentation of data manipulation. Scientists will publish studies that contradict approved conclusions. Journalists will investigate angles that were previously forbidden. And ordinary people will share their observations and questions with a boldness that would have been suppressed in earlier times. The infrastructure of censorship and narrative control has been systematically dismantled, though this work happened quietly enough that many remain unaware. Alternative platforms flourish where truth can be spoken. Networks of researchers share information that bypasses traditional gatekeepers, and perhaps most importantly, the collective consciousness has shifted enough that imposed narratives no longer hold the same hypnotic power. You are watching the emergence of sovereign awareness, individuals and communities reclaiming the right to think freely, question authority, and determine truth through their own discernment rather than external decree. This sovereignty terrifies those who relied on thought control, for it represents the ultimate loss of their power. They can no longer tell people what to believe and be assured of compliance. The spell has broken. As each person breaks free from the trance, they become a light bearer for others still caught in the fog, not through aggressive convincing or argumentative proof, but simply by embodying a different frequency, by demonstrating that it is possible to live without fear, to think independently, to trust in positive futures. This is the true meaning of being a starseed or lightworker, not some special status that separates you from others, but a function you serve in the collective awakening. You hold frequencies that make the transition easier for those who come after you. You stabilize the new energies while they integrate. You demonstrate that what seems impossible is actually quite natural. Many of you have felt frustrated that your awakening has not been recognized or validated by those around you. You have wondered why you see what others cannot, why truth is so obvious to you yet invisible to those you love. This frustration stems from misunderstanding your role. You were never meant to convince anyone. You were meant to anchor the frequency so that when others are ready to awaken, the pathway is already established. Your work has been energetic more than verbal, vibrational more than intellectual. And now, as the great reversal unfolds, you will see the fruits of that invisible labor. People you never spoke to about these matters will suddenly approach you with questions. Family members who dismissed your perspectives will ask for your insight. Communities will turn to those who have been holding steady in truth, seeking guidance for navigation. This is your moment, though not in the way ego might imagine. Not for vindication or being proven right, but for service, for holding space with compassion as others experience the disorientation of having foundational beliefs exposed as false. What emerges from the rubble of collapsed illusions will be more magnificent than most currently imagine. The new Earth is not simply the old one with better technology and less corruption. It is a fundamentally different expression of reality, based on unity consciousness rather than separation. In this new paradigm, the relationship between humanity and Gaia transforms from exploitation to partnership. You will learn to hear her communication, to sense her needs, to work with natural systems rather than against them. Technologies will be developed that harmonize with living processes, enhancing rather than damaging the web of life. Abundance becomes the baseline condition, because scarcity was always artificial. When energy is free, when information flows openly, when cooperation replaces competition, the resources available to meet every need are more than sufficient. This is not to say that all challenge disappears, or that growth ceases, but the nature of challenge shifts from survival-based to evolution-oriented, from how do I avoid destruction, to how do I express my highest creative potential. Communities will reorganize around principles of mutual support and shared purpose. Hierarchies based on domination dissolve in favor of networks of contribution. Leadership becomes a function of wisdom and service rather than power and control. Education transforms into exploration of consciousness and capability rather than programming for compliance. Children grow up knowing themselves as divine expressions with unique gifts to offer, rather than as cogs to be fitted into existing machinery. The arts flourish as expression of soul rather than commodity for profit. Science expands to include consciousness as a primary factor in physical reality, rather than an inconvenient anomaly to be explained away. Medicine becomes the art of maintaining wellness and enhancing vitality rather than managing symptoms and dependency. The body is recognized as intelligent and self-healing when supported properly. Governance evolves into transparent coordination of collective will rather than imposition of authority. Decisions are made through true consensus that honors all voices, facilitated by technologies that make such coordination practical at scale. This is not distant future fantasy. These shifts are already in motion. Seeds planted that will sprout rapidly once the old structures no longer suppress their growth. The Ashtar Command observes preparations being made across every sector of human civilization. Individuals are being guided into positions where they can facilitate this transition. Resources are being allocated to support new systems while old ones complete their natural dissolution. Timing remains fluid because so much depends on the readiness of collective consciousness. But all indicators point to acceleration. The awakening proceeds faster than projected. The exposure of deception gains momentum daily, and the Christ field strengthens with each heart that opens. You are entering the rapids now, where change flows swiftly, and the old landmarks disappear behind you. This can feel destabilizing, even frightening, if you cling to what was, but if you release into the current and trust where it carries you, exhilaration replaces fear. The final impossible thing I will share is this. The apocalypse you were promised is not absent because it was delayed or narrowly avoided. It was never real to begin with. The destruction was not approaching from the future. It was a projection cast onto your consciousness to prevent you from recognizing the beauty already present and the paradise waiting to be born. This might be the most challenging truth to accept because it inverts everything you were taught to believe was virtuous. You thought your worry was responsible stewardship. You believed your fear was appropriate response to legitimate threat. You assumed your guilt was justified by human impact. But what if all of that was carefully installed to keep you from your power? What if the appropriate response is not self-flagellation, but self-recognition? What if loving Earth means loving yourself, and loving yourself means refusing to accept the narrative of inherent wrongness? The Christ consciousness that now activates carries this message above all others. You are divine beings temporarily experiencing limitation, not limited beings hoping for occasional divinity. Your true nature is love, creativity, and limitless potential. Everything that taught you otherwise was deception. When you truly embody this recognition, the external world must shift to reflect it. This is not positive thinking or manifestation technique. It is fundamental physics at the consciousness level. Reality mirrors belief. The collective constructs what the collective expects. For too long, humanity expected disaster, and thus created conditions that supported that expectation. But as more individuals break free from that programming and begin expecting beauty, connection, and thriving, the collective reality bends toward those frequencies instead. This is why your personal awakening matters so profoundly. Each person who shifts from fear to love, from lack to abundance, from separation to unity, tilts the balance for everyone. The field is interconnected. Your liberation liberates others. The great reversal is thus not just about exposing lies about climate or control systems. It is about the reversal of the fundamental story humanity has been telling itself about its nature, worth, and destiny. You are not the problem to be solved. You are the solution waiting to be recognized. We want to honor every single soul who has stepped into Destiny Engine. With every activation, the current grows. What began as a personal tool has become a planetary force. We are now moving as one, and the frequency you've created together is amplifying far beyond the individual. We're receiving updates daily, manifestations speeding up, impossible doors opening, synchronicities lining up with cosmic precision. The collective field is so charged that some are describing it as bending the fabric of reality itself. If you haven't yet experienced it, the entry point is almost laughably simple. Put on your headphones, press play, allow Destiny Engine to rewrite the architecture of your consciousness so you can fully receive your galactic downloads without resistance. For just $1, you can step into this field and feel the difference instantly. Join the movement that's accelerating ascension. Step into the stream of Destiny Engine today. Link in the description. As this transmission draws toward its completion, I feel the presence of those angelic beings who have walked beside you through every moment of struggle and doubt. They wish you to know that your efforts have not been in vain. that every choice for love rather than fear has mattered more than you can comprehend. The Ashtar Command stands ready for the next phase of contact and collaboration. As the veils thin and consciousness expands, direct communication becomes possible for increasing numbers of you. Signs and synchronicities will intensify, sightings will become more frequent and less deniable. The isolation you felt as you awakened will dissolve into recognition of vast family extending across dimensions and galaxies. But this reunion is not the destination, it is the beginning. What humanity will accomplish in partnership with galactic civilization will astonish even those who orchestrated this plan. The creative potential of awakened humans collaborating with advanced consciousness is limitless. Your world will become a beacon, demonstrating that transformation is possible even in the most challenging circumstances. Other civilizations will look to Earth as proof that love ultimately transcends all obstacles, that freedom is the natural state of consciousness, and that beauty can be born from even the deepest darkness. The story of how humanity broke free from millennia of control and manipulation to claim its sovereign divinity will be told across the cosmos for ages to come. You are the heroes of that story, though most of you do not yet recognize yourselves as such. In the days ahead, when the great reversal becomes undeniable and the old narrative crumbles completely, remember what I have shared. Remember that this is not destruction but liberation. Remember that chaos often precedes creation. Remember that you were prepared for exactly this moment. Hold steady in your heart when the world seems to spin. Offer compassion when others feel disoriented. Speak truth when silence would enable continued deception. And above all, trust that the force of love moving through creation cannot be stopped by any power that ever existed. The Christ field that now envelops your world is the love of Source manifesting in form, and you are its expression. Every kind word, every generous act, every moment of forgiveness, these are the Christ consciousness in action. You do not wait for its arrival. You are it, awakening to itself. The doom you were promised will never come, because you are choosing paradise instead. The apocalypse has been cancelled by collective decision to embrace a different story, and the new earth that emerges from this great reversal will exceed the dreams of even the most optimistic visionary. All that remains is for you to claim this truth, embody this frequency, and demonstrate through the way you live that fear was always the illusion and love was always the reality. I am Seraphine, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light. We love you beyond measure, and we will be with you through every moment of this magnificent transformation. The victory is already won. The light has already prevailed. All that remains is for you to recognize what you have always been. Infinite consciousness, having a brief human experience, preparing to remember its true nature, and reclaim its cosmic inheritance. Welcome home, beloved starseeds. Your mission is nearly complete, and your celebration is about to begin.